Hello and welcome to our second live broadcast at the NPM convention. This is a panel discussion on church music organizations. So we have with us AGO and HSUSC and NPM. I'm AWR at PT, also known as Pray Tell Blog. And I do want to introduce my friends to you briefly before we start talking about what is happening in a rapidly changing environment with church music organizations. So we have Preston Dibble representing the American AGO for the next 45 minutes. Preston is on the National Committee for Marketing and is also of the Task Force on Denominational Associations, as well as a couple other AGO and also NPM, actually. Horst Buchholz ist ein Deutscher, and he's with the Church Music Association of America. So if you go to musicasacra.com, you will see all of the resources that they have. And of course, it's very interesting because CMAA has a somewhat different philosophy and approach than NPM. We're all friends and we all like each other, but we don't all look at the world the same way. So good to have you with us, Horst. Sipkje, Pesnichak, am I saying it?
Pesnichak, yep.
Yeah, Sipkje is with us from the Hymn Society States and Canada. Sipkje is on the executive committee of the Hymn Society and will be telling us all the exciting things they are doing. Msgr Hilgartner, of course, is the president of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians. Father Rick is beginning his second year, I believe, this month with NPM. So we're here to talk about what's going on in church music organizations. And I just Googled this morning, are people joiners anymore? And of course, the first thing that comes up is an article saying that people do not join like they used to. They're not joining clubs, they're not joining, whether it's the Knights of Columbus or the JCs, they're not joining political parties in the same way. How do you folks see the landscape and how is it affecting your particular organization? Are you seeing signs that people are not joining up the way they once did, dealing with declines or changes?
I can tell you simply by this week at our convention here, our numbers look good, but years ago, there are a lot of part of it is those numbers about joining also have to do with churches. People are far less committed to self-identifying as a member of a church or a parish. And so those things affect us as well. But we have a smaller number of parishes in the United States than we did 20 years ago. Even though there's growth in some areas, there's constriction and twinning and clustering in other places. So when we look at our membership base, we have a smaller base of the number of directors of music ministry in parishes. That's a challenge for us. But this week we have a lot of hope because we have a lot of young, new, starting out church musicians who are with us, and a larger number of younger members this year, which is encouraging for us.
It looks like more than last year or 2 years ago.
Definitely.
Am I just seeing what I want to?
No, I think there's truth in that.
Okay.
The American Guild of Organists has just completed an exhaustive member survey, which a little over 5,000 members participate in, so that the AGO could really understand who our members are, to begin to try to understand, to solve the recruiting conundrum, and it revealed a lot of interesting things for us. Specifically how bad the bubble of the baby boomer generation is within AGO's membership. There should be a gentle of the age of our membership, and we go up very large for the baby boomers, and then there is a steep plummet for all future generations. But we found that that segment of the population has affected all different types of associations, be it church music or any other field. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of excitement, again, with Father Rick's point, with younger members. One of the things that we've done is to try to start a virtual AGO chapter, which is being launched this summer. And you would still be a member of an actual chapter, but it's targeted only at younger members. I believe it's they've decided you have to be less than 30 to be part of this virtual chapter. But the chapter programs and events, if you will all happen via social media. So we're trying to out to that younger generation, because generationally, they're not joiners.
Something within the Hymn Society, we've seen the same sort of decline in the same basic age group, but we also notice that people, just because they're not necessarily joining, doesn't mean they don't want to participate in things. And so we find that people are really wanting to participate, whether it's in person or on web-based formats, but they're not necessarily joining. So it's sort of taking a different turn, I think, at this moment in our organizations.
I just read that Hymn Society, we will be 290 at the convention or conference next week in New Orleans. That seems like a pretty good number to me and comparable to what it was 2 or 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, we've noticed the last or so years that there's been a lot more work from within the organization to make phone calls to our members and just say, we'd like to invite you. We've had record attendance in our Richmond conference 2 years ago and the Columbus, Ohio conference we had last year, and 290 is pretty close to where we've been these last few years. So it's been partially from, like I said, people making phone calls, just a lot of excitement building within our organization for a lot of different reasons.
Can you give us, Sipkje, any general impressions of age demographics at conventions? I recall, 8 or 10 years ago when I was on the executive committee, we were talking about a very aging membership, AGO and somewhat to NPM. Has there been, outreach that's worked with younger members?
For many years we've offered a Loveless Scholarship. It's in name of Austin Loveless, a composer and church musician, and through the Loveless Scholarship it's for full-time students. They don't necessarily have to be college age, but it gives them scholarship, travel, and the registration fees, so they basically can attend for free. And we've seen a growing number of people applying and also being able to be accepted through that program. Last summer we had 16 first-year scholars, which is almost double what we have. And then we started it was the first year of a program that we're offering where we have second-year Loveless Scholars, so they get a reduced stipend but still get some monetary assistance to help them in subsequent years. And these Loveless Scholars assist in many areas within the conference, so they often help to lead morning prayer or night prayer. They'll help do other things that might not necessarily be music related but are really helpful within the organization. And it allows them to create connections with older members of our society who really have the knowledge and the experience that those of us in our generation are looking for.
Wonderful. Horst, CMAA might be the youngest in its membership of any of us represented here.
One of the older organizations. CMAA started right after Vatican II, but the membership is all small. Currently we have less than 1,000 members. So that's a very small membership. But we only have one paid staff member who works part-time and a small army of very dedicated volunteers. So the structure is very, very different. And the members are automatically subscribing members to our journal, Sacred Music, which is a very fine scholarly written journal. The greatest benefit of the CMAA that they are willing to give community at large is really the resources that are available for free online. And I think there we have daily downloads in great numbers. We also have a summer conference, the colloquium. And again, the colloquium is attended by many, many people who are not subscribing members to the CMA. You do not have to be a member. And what I've seen over the last 10 years that I've been involved with CMAA is that the attendance at the colloquium in particular is getting younger and younger and younger. So there's a lot of young people who seem to be drawn to more traditional liturgy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have the impression that CMAA has been just reinvented in the past 10 years. After the council, I'm going to generalize very broadly. All the enthusiasm was on the left, and CMAA was kind of a small group trying to hold its ground. I saw that shift starting in the 90s and it only increased so that now I think CMAA has a lot of life, a lot of newness, new initiatives, very active website. Does that fit your impression, Horst?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's maybe a slightly different approach. I mean, growing up in Germany, I'm always fascinated to see how the same council documents were interpreted and implemented in different ways in different conferences. And of course, there may be a slightly more quality music tradition prior to the council. So the Germans read these documents. It's like, okay, what to keep our music? And here it says, okay, the treasure of inestimable value needs to be preserved and kept, so the Latin language should be kept in the Roman Rite. Okay, we're safe. So they held on, not just in cathedrals, but in many churches, to keeping the musical tradition alive. And very often in the United States, the musical quality may have been quite so great, and there were third-rate compositions by fourth-rate composers sung by fifth-rate choirs and wobbling voices, where people said, okay, now the council says we can get rid of that all. Praise be the Lord. Let's have the congregation. And so they saw the same documents and interpreted in a different way. So the CMAA here, though, has tried to keep some of the more traditional aspects that are given in the council documents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. I do want to talk about how all of this is affecting conventions and conferences and what kinds of trends you're seeing there. We started to touch on that a little bit, but I'd be very curious. And here my sense is that AGO is facing the biggest challenge around convention attendees. NPM would be a close second. And I think Hymn Society has really seen a kind of a revival, and CMAA is seeing growth. But what's your impressions?
Well, I think AGO conventions have actually been holding fairly steady over the last decade.
Okay.
AGO operates our regional conventions in, odd-numbered years, and national conventions in even-numbered years. AGO went through kind of a restructuring of the leadership the past 4 resulted in 9 regions being reduced to 7. So we now have 7 regional conventions, which are occurring throughout this summer. And I believe our convention, the attendance at regional conventions is anywhere from the low hundreds. I believe New Haven really surprised everyone last week, and they had over 300 registrations, which almost doubled their that. I guess they did well. One of the things, again, trying to reach to a younger audience is we are doing a lot of live streaming of some of the performances and workshops at regional conventions this year. The Charlotte convention, which was last week, several of the recitals over the internet. So trying to change with the times.
Mm-hmm. Now, does live streaming help promote the organization, or does it give people a reason to stay home? They can now see the NPM plenums in their pajamas.
Yes, and thank you to this blog for providing that service and raising that question for us. I think we're probably the largest of our 4 groups in terms of national convention attendance. So, at our peak, we were probably at 4,000.
At a convention.
At a convention. That goes back 20 years ago. This year we're at about 1,800, which is good for us. Next year in Houston, the Houston Planning Committee promises us that they will have 3,000. And Cardinal, who will be the hosting bishop next year and is the Episcopal moderator, representative of the USCCB to NPM, he is really challenging them to do that. And he's gotten support from all the Texas dioceses for that. But part of it comes to the question of joining younger members who might not have the disposable income to do travel to a large convention. That's a challenge for us because our conventions are bigger. We can't use college campuses or smaller church venues that might be more economical, where we're using a convention center, an anchor hotel. So we're talking air travel, 3 or 4 nights, plus the cost of registration. We have scholarship money. But I chatted yesterday with a couple of our young people who are on scholarships this year through the University of Notre Dame and the Stephen Warner Scholarship from the Notre Dame Folk Choir. This is their last year to be eligible for that because that's technically for an undergrad. And they're saying, what is there that we can offer in terms of financial help people who are looking towards full-time music ministry but don't yet have a job in the parish that will allow them the salary, the disposable income, and the support from the parish to send them to a conference. I know a lot of people are in small churches now that don't have the education money. When budgets get, the first thing that goes is conference travel, which is understandable in some respects. So the virtual things, the online workshops, and NPM is starting to look more at what we can do for members in terms of webinars and other sorts of virtual conferences, we think can only help. Because the experience, and we're hearing, nothing replaces the experience of actually being here, because it's not just hearing a conference or hearing a presentation or a stream of a concert or performance, but it's the actual engagement in worship, celebrating the Eucharist with an assembly of 1,800 musicians who can sing a variety of styles. Nothing can replace being in that assembly, and that's a big part of the convention experience.
So I think we're all trying to promote that, but also finding new ways to reach out to people who don't come.
One of the things that we found in that survey was the chief reason that belonged to the AGO was actually the opportunity to network with professional colleagues. So even though there's conventions and certifications and educational programs and the magazine and all these other things, the real value or perceived value for membership by our guild is that human interaction. So we're really trying to use that as the lens to look through everything that we do on how why you would want to be part of it.
And that's one of the really great things about the Hymn Society Conference, and I think it holds true for all of our organizations, is being able to be there in person, friends, and make new connections with people who, for us, we are all hymn lovers, whether we work in a church or just attend, or are pastors, text writers. And for us to see in a hymnal these names of people who are still working today and publishing, and then sit down and have lunch or dinner with them and just converse about whatever has been happening that day, and getting to know these people on a personal level is really special. And I think that's something that is also helping to draw some of the is because they're able to see how easy it is within our group to meet all these people and really get to know them.
Yeah, that is the strength of Hymn Society. For people who are into mainline Protestant hymnals, you see all these names all the time. You can go there and Shaw and Mel Bringle and, Paul Westermeyer.
One of the specifics of the conventions of this Church Music Association, the colloquium, is that all the participants are asked to participate in one of the choirs and one of the chant groups. So we have probably about 250 people attending those, and there are 4 choirs and 5 chant groups for real beginners, intermediate, refreshers, and the width of the attendees is quite amazing. When we have very professional colleagues, church music leaders, as well as people who may not even sing in their local and just sit in the pews, but this is their chance to sing. So put these together and try to sing some Palestrina with them is some challenge. So the ability of groups is very broad, but I think that's the real benefit, that people say this is such a wonderful experience, that they all get to participate in one of those singing groups in the daily mass and office that we pray together.
And it'd be very interesting to know, why do people come to CMAA or NPM or any other convention? Are they coming because I want to learn more, I want to find out what the documents mean, I want to buy new music? Or are they actually coming because, that Latin high mass or that, sung morning prayer, it's so powerful that experience brings? I suspect it's a mix.
We make sure there's not just the Latin high mass.
I didn't mean to put you in a box.
There has to be at least one mass that's completely in English. But the point is that the mass is sung. That it's not just a spoken mass, and that we even explore in a completely vernacular. We really try even one little Agnus Dei or a little motet there. This has to be completely in English. That there is a presence of the propers. We talk about that maybe this afternoon, as well. Carefully audition them almost that can actually sing the mass.
And you're saying that's a very powerful experience that you think brings people back. This kind of worship and singing in a choir.
No, I think so. I think it has and some of the mysterium, the mystery of faith that we really try to instill in our congregation.
I just want to share one little anecdote from the opening event on Monday. There was a new text and tune composed for this convention to reflect the theme on the 50th anniversary of Gaudium et Spes. It's a Nora Duncan composition, and the text draws largely from the texts of Gaudium et Spes. It's a text addressed to Christ as a prayer to inspire the joys and the hopes in our response to the call to be a missionary church, missionary disciples. During the opening event that was sung for the first time, and in our program it's printed in 4 parts with descants with instructions about who sings what in each verse. And during the final verse of that hymn, I was coming up to the stage along with Bishop Walkowiak, the Bishop of Grand Rapids, Cardinal DiNardo, our Episcopal moderator, and the mayor of Grand Rapids, who was going to welcome us. And the mayor is actually a United Church former minister. He's been mayor for a number of years here. But as we came up the stage and the hymn was ending with some grand brass fanfare and coda, the mayor looked at me and said, "Wow, this is a truly a transformational experience." And says, "I see why people come to this. Just to be part of an assembly of 1,800 musicians lifting their voices in song." And we'll use this same hymn tomorrow night at the Eucharist and during the closing event. But it's that experience of joining together in song. Yesterday morning during the keynote, they used part of a text set to the Finlandia tune, and it was done a cappella and was immediately in 4 parts, even though all they had up on the screen was the melody line. The opportunity for people to just engage in that kind of spontaneous, amazing singing is wonderful.
It's very powerful, and we have to share that experience and let people know about it, because I do think it is something people are looking for, even if they don't know that yet. I want to talk a little bit about how we are all outreaching to an organization, or more broadly, aren't a part of the church. It does strike me that the 5 of us here all belong to a certain race and ethnic group here. How are each of your organizations dealing with the rapidly changing society? The Catholic Church is approaching 50% Hispanic membership. We're seeing greater and greater cultural and racial diversity. What does the outreach look like, and what are the struggles and maybe some success stories any of you would like to share?
Well, at least in terms of our convention programming, AG has cultural diversity requirements for the presenters and performers that the core committees are required to plan diversely for the leaders. And I think if we model diversity, then we're supporting diversity.
Our main form of the Hymn Society are our summer conferences, and so we're in a different area of the country, so that allows us to reach out to different people in different areas. We'll be in, like we said, New Orleans this summer, so it's a pretty different area for us to be in from the last 4 or 5 years. But at all of our conferences, there's a wide variety, similar to what you said with the presenters, not just with the presenters, but the songs that we sing and what's chosen for the hymn festivals each night to help all of us who are there embrace the song of other cultures and other people. And I think that's one way that we're starting to try and become more inclusive and reaching out to these different people who are all around us.
Mm-hmm. Our keynote yesterday was a panel discussion that was about this very question. And one of the speakers, Diana McAlintal, invited members of our gathering to stand, and as we talked about generationally where people were from, what generations they represented, and countries of origin. And looking at our membership base right now doesn't exactly reflect the national statistics in many ways. And that's really a challenge to our association. Next year we'll be in Houston. Convention planning is looking very much at bilingual expressions and bilingual tracks, bilingual programming, and we will be reflecting a lot on the cultural landscape, particularly in Texas, that's manifest in many, many ways. And we're going more in that direction. We have to, because that is where the church is at. And Sacrosanct called for the admission of the songs of the people to be admitted for use in the liturgy, alongside proper texts, the preservation of chant, and our patrimony and our heritage. And I think NPM really strives to look at the breadth and depth of all of that in looking at all the options that are allowed. And you could walk around this exhibit hall and see the various publishers who promote chant, who promote contemporary forms of music, who promote music in different languages reflecting the cultures of our peoples. The growth, we have one publisher that has a Vietnamese hymnal for use in the United States, and a number of the publishers carrying more and more Spanish music, new compositions as well as the traditional songs of the people from those lands.
Yeah, I think we've faced different sorts of challenges as I look out at those of us who are represented here. And it's fascinating that the AGO has quotas to say that we want, to make sure people are represented. But that AGO and CMAA are most tied by their mission and history to a repertoire that's pretty Western and Eurocentric. So probably, I don't mean to over push it, but by nature not as able to do world music and ethnic music. Whereas I suspect Hymn Society and NPM have the greatest diversity in terms of repertoire, but tell me if I'm overstating this, it does tend to be kind of old white liberals who want to sing all of this music of different world musics, but I have to say it, and it pains me to say it, NPM I think is really struggling to welcome in the people. How do we get the people here not just to become like us and join our organization, but how do we refound it so that there are, the Hispanic and the Asian and the other peoples?
I think part of this issue, as I see it as the president of NPM, is a matter of resources. Because in many of our parishes that are predominantly Hispanic, a lot of the music ministry is done by people who are volunteers, who don't have the resources to travel to a convention or even join an organization. And one of our challenges as a membership that is predominantly Anglo, striving and in some places struggling to minister in a more diverse community than we ourselves come from. And I put myself in that category. I'm white, Anglo, Eurocentric, East Coast priest of a diocese that is undergoing a lot of transition, and I'm now pastor of a parish that has a thriving young Latino community, and I don't yet speak Spanish. I've promised them that I will be able to at least read Spanish, and by September I will be celebrating Mass in Spanish with a lot of coaching and a lot of relying on my Italian. So, but I'm committed to that because I look at our parish and this is part of our community. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of our parishes. It's not an unwillingness or a sense of a lack of hospitality so much as it's a shifting landscape, and how fast can we shift with the landscape communities. And we're trying, but in some ways we can't go fast enough.
What's happening in the Hymn Society, Sipkje?
The Hymn Society this summer is welcoming, I think it's 10 or 12 church musicians from Brazil. João Faustini is bringing in a number of his colleagues, and last year there were 3 or 4 of them, and I think they must have gone home and said, come and see what we're doing. And I just remembered as you were talking about all the different demographics, fantastic hymn festival featuring songs from different Asian countries, and it was a really fantastic experience for those of us who aren't able to participate in that kind of hymnody, and it was being led by people who that is their native music. And so it was really moving and special for those of us who aren't of that tradition or of that culture to experience that firsthand. And I think that's one nice thing about being at conferences like this, and we're making more of an effort to help expand all of our horizons in that way.
How does CMAA think about cultural diversity? Is it predominantly Anglo like NPM? I know that Latin chant, and that's not all that you do, but that certainly speaks to people of all races and cultures.
Yeah, I mean, looking at our conferences, we can certainly increase diversity. I mean, that there's no doubt about that as far as the attendance is concerned. I think, though, I mean, looking at the contents is one thing, but looking at the expenses to register for a conference, to fly there, the convention hotels are never cheap. There is also an economic component, so that might keep some of the minorities maybe away from that. I mean, the CMAA has a lot of resources available that are for free. So, I mean, but we don't know, I mean, are these people white, black, green, or yellow that download things there? Yes, I mean, of course, the Latin language as the university is something that speaks to everybody. And I will never forget when I was in Denver at the cathedral, we tried to find a good setting of the Lamb of God for this. I had a wonderful parish secretary, and I sang her every Cordero de Dios that I could find. She says, no, don't know that one. Don't know that. And finally, on Agnus Dei, oh, I know that one. So we ended up singing something in Latin there at the. So.
Is CMAA thinking about moving into not just English chant, but also, Spanish and Vietnamese and the other vernacular languages?
We've had a few single requests, but there is not a whole direction that I would say this is going. But I mean, Father Sam Weber, who's written propers in English now, actually is working on some Spanish propers, and we've had some requests. Can we have an entrance antiphon in Spanish? It's okay. He doesn't even know Spanish? Who can write something like that? So occasionally that comes, but there's not a huge request for that.
I'd like to shift to talk a little bit about how conventions and conferences are changing in terms of programming with all these, electronic resources and ways of live streaming, but also changing attention spans, also changes in how we relate to speakers. What are your organizations doing to shift? I'm most aware of what NPM is doing with some new formats, but I'm curious how others are handling it. So it's not just the same old, a long lecture and then a breakout and then another long lecture and then a worship service.
Last year at AGO's National Convention in Boston, they tried a different track in the workshops where they basically invited members who have worked on doctoral dissertations. So we have these very, very scholarly documents and texts written on very, very things, and they'd put 3 or 4 in one hour session that were similar, so you could go and have an experience that was, to your point, requiring a short attention span, but it was really a great way to utilize existing talent which is there, give folks something in depth without it going on for 2 hours.
Was it well received?
It was. Honestly not sure if that's going to be a piece of our national convention next year or not.
Other innovations?
The Hymn Society, each conference is kind of the same but also kind of different, because each summer we go to a different college campus in a different part of the country and we make a concerted effort to get to a different part of the country and get to Canada about every 5 years, because we're all one large hymn society here in North America. So we have sort of the same outline where we have big hymn festivals in the evening, a morning plenary, sectionals in the afternoon and early evening. But the topic and theme of every hymn society conference is always different. So we've got different focus for each summer that we're meeting. But we're also in the midst of a really big change within our organization, which I think in the next few years will probably have a more of a changing impact on how our conferences happen. And about 4 years ago, what congregational song should and will be looking like over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so out of that has come the Center for Congregational Song.
Tell us all about it. I'm so glad you brought it up. I wanted to hear about the center.
Yes, and I'm really honored to be on the executive committee as this is starting to be implemented. When we were in PEG for our summer conference a few summers ago, Deborah Carlton-Loftus, our executive director, asked all of the attendees to really start dreaming and thinking about what you want to see out of the Hymn Society. And little did we know, the executive committee had been talking for a year or so about creating the Center for Congregational Song, because as a hymn society, it's not just hymns that we sing. We sing the traditional hymns that we think of as, 4-part standard harmony with organ accompaniment, but there's congregational song, praise music, taze, all these different aspects, and we want to try and make sure that we're bringing that into who we are as an organization. And so moment, we're about halfway through our endowment campaign of raising $2.2 million, and we only started it
1.1 million.
just about, and we started 2 or 3 years ago now. So we're really happy about how that's happening, and we're going to start rolling out part of the center this summer at our conference in New Orleans. And there's going to be some more online resources like we were talking about earlier, how we can reach people that way. And it's going to really, I think, do a lot to help the Hymn Society grow.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your. I've already gotten 2 phone messages left whether I can donate to this new endowment. All I can give is Hail Marys. I won't have to give as a monk, but it makes me wonder: is every member receiving that kind of outreach? I suspect they are.
We have a really great development committee that's been working very hard these last few years to help grow this campaign and reach out and tell our members how exciting this is and what a great opportunity it will be for our whole organization. And they have really good records of who has donated, who has not. Last summer, one of the big across from members is that it's not how much you donate, it's that you do donate, because a lot of the grants that we're looking for want to see how many of our 1,500 member society are actually campaign. If it's only 100 or 200, then these grant givers are thinking, well, if people aren't invested in this, what's the benefit? So they're really working hard to get everyone on board, whether they can give $1 or $100 or $1,000, so that we can go forth and say, we're really excited about this change in our organization.
2.2 million. You're starting to look a little green with envy as I compare you two in the filming lights here. That's so exciting. And I understand it's a new full-time position or perhaps additional staff?
Yes. It's full-time just yet, so I don't want to commit to that. But this summer, someone has been hired, and that person will be introduced at the conference next week. And so we're really excited that we'll have and it'll be a experience for everyone as we work to incorporate the center. It's not that the Hymn Society is becoming the Center for Congregational Song, it's that the Center for Congregational Song will become a big resource within the Hymn Society.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with what's happening in the Hymn Society. So if I may ask, does it feel to you like there is a new energy? Are people talking about that?
I think so. My first Hymn Society conference was when we were at St. Olaf, and I was a Loveless Scholar that summer, and it was Carl Dawes last summer, and it was Deb's sort of first transitional summer, and so it's been really interesting. I haven't experienced how the Hymn Society was maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, but by talking to others who have been longtime members of the Hymn Society, there's been a lot of growth, and everyone has been so excited about the way that it's been moving.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Let's turn to the future. I guess I'll give each of you an opportunity to speak to this. What do you think might be, CMAA 2020 or NPM 2025? As you look 3 or 5 or 10 years down the road, what do you expect? You can be honest about probably a declining membership, or maybe even more young conservatives pouring through the front doors. Would you wager any predictions and what you think might be changing in your organization because of it?
Well, I think for AGO, as I was mentioning, that bell curve of the baby boomer generation, that's going to have an impact on AGO, I know for certain. And there's no recruiting campaign or drive for membership which is going to be able to stave that gap. So it's going to be a smaller membership, but we plan for it to be a stronger and more active membership. We're really, targeting our energies to our membership that are not active in local chapter functions and don't take advantage of conventions and certifications and the other programs. So it's not so much of putting all our eggs and finding more members, but in making the members we have more active, which will in turn keep them as members because there's a greater value.
More engaged.
Yeah, I think the CMA membership is always a small group, but we certainly want to increase our numbers. One thing that the CMA only did, probably 5, 6 7 years ago, is started moving the conferences to different locations, because for years it was always at Christendom College, then at Catholic University, and then we ventured to Chicago, to Salt Lake City, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, and next year in St. Louis. I had nothing to do with it. Actually, I felt like the Lord let this chalice pass.
But you will have a lot to do with it.
I will have a lot to do with it when they come to St. Louis next year. So to move around, because we always feel that we get a lot of people from those regions that have not been to a conference before. So I think that's a good thing, to have conference locations, and who knows, one day we may be in Minnesota.
That would be wonderful.
Going off of what Horst mentioned, and obviously the Center for Congregational Song is going to have a big impact on our future, but we're starting to create and plan more regional events, because for the most part, the only time we gather as Hymn Society members in large quantities are at our annual summer conferences. So this coming year, we have events in the works for San Francisco area, Grand Rapids, to try and, like you said, get more people in these regional areas to become maybe not involved, but experience what the Hymn Society can do. Because as you mentioned with NPM, there's really nothing like being in this place, singing with all these other church musicians and liturgical music, people who love liturgical music, and it's just really transformative.
Rick, I think you'd have plenty of changes that are already underway to talk about.
Yes, I mean, we've just emerged from some restructuring. We're a membership of 6,000 right now, which, at our height, we were probably close to 10,000 members, with a large full-time staff. And so our full-time staff in our office and our headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland, has been tightened up a bit, reduced in size. Overhead that we really, I don't want to say we didn't need, but we certainly couldn't afford in some ways. But we're looking at membership, we're looking at the diversity questions, and the fact that we do move our conference every year. The convention moves, and next year we'll be in Houston. It'll be the first time we've had a national convention in Texas. That will really help us with being more effective at responding to in the church in the United States. Look out 5 years and see us with a younger membership as the next of church music leaders, directors come through, who are more able to respond to these cultural trends. The other thing we're looking at is, what do people want to take away from a convention like ours? For a long time it was, I want to go home with the latest new music. But more and more communities are recognizing that perhaps the repertoire is somewhat saturated. Do we need another setting of a communion? Do we need another setting of, we can't keep up with what we have. So some of our members are looking for more professional enrichment. So we're looking more at certification programs, certificate programs. We had 40 people participate this week in one of the cantor certification tracks that today are doing their adjudication to earn their basic cantor certificate. We offer certification jointly with AGO in organ certification. We have this year launched a piano certification. We're looking at a pastoral liturgy certificate program that we might partner with one of the universities that offers graduate programs in liturgical studies, so that our music directors who might be credentialed and degreed in music but don't have the wherewithal to also get credentialed and degreed in theology or liturgical studies might be able to take advantage of a certificate program that we offer through an intensive institute or a track here at a convention, so that you go home from a convention not just having experienced a whole range of random workshops with keynotes interspersed, but you'd rather enroll in an intensive track that basically is what you do and you might go home with 15 or 20 hours with a liturgical scholar or theologian and have a certificate to show for it, something that you can actually put on a resume or rather than just a bag of music that you got at showcases.
So lots of interesting developments. I will invite all of you back in 5 years, and we'll check in and see how it all went. So I think our time is nearly up. We'll be back this afternoon at 3:30 looking at English plain chant and adaptations from Latin chant. So Horst will be back for that. So I hope to see you all online for that. And I want to thank all of you for this panel and this rich discussion. So thank you, Preston and Horst and Sipkje and Father Rick.
Thank you.